more YouTube for you. You've engaged with the man, and that's what it's about. YouTube can only take you so far. There's plenty stuff up on Samro. Here's the general manager, who is a passionate supporter of Music Exchange, and I'm incredibly thankful, and a doer. Karabo Senna, a warm round of applause, please, for someone who's major action.
Thanks, Mark. Martin, and I know Mark has been literally, I want to thank Mark as well, because he's a fellow Cape Townian, and he was instrumental, obviously, in shaping things. But obviously what we want to talk about today, from our perspective, is obviously the future, right? And for the most part, for about 5 years in Samro, I firstly started leading the membership area, and that was more dealing with creatives and the publishers. So I have a good sense of obviously what's wrong, with the system and what we need to do. And obviously from a money side, what we are trying to focus on is how do we then solve the problems? And I can assure you, it starts off by getting the money in, and then obviously working on paying it out, right? So as we start, I just want to start off obviously with this two distinctive rights, because it helps us as we go along. The fact that we all know, we often say copyright, but obviously we are talking about two different rights. The main one that Samro would represent, obviously, it's that copyright in the composition, but obviously there's the recording part, which the label would obviously speak to. And normally in South Africa, from a rights perspective, that would be then, SAMPRA. So the two being, Capaso and Samro focus on copyright in the composition, meaning if you are a writer of music, those are the two that you need to be signed up with. And we often encourage that if you are a creator, please work on your writing skills, right? Be it you compose beats or you're writing lyrics. The importance for us is that, you've got a lot more revenue streams. And especially, people like me who try and chase after the money, you will realize very soon that, earning from, different source of royalties is actually a good thing for you. So part of what I'm going to touch on, it's not just going to be Samro, it's also sensitizing you to what's happening around the world from a revenue stream, and to show you where we are as Africa, as South Africa as well. So a lot of the information that you see here is from the CSAC collection report. So essentially, all societies that, in a sense, are compliant are registered with CSAC, and then we would send through our revenue through, so that, everybody knows what's happening in which society. That's the whole, logic of it. You will notice that globally, this report is obviously 2021. The new one will come through, hasn't come out as yet. But you will notice that music value has constantly appreciated in terms of usage, right? But herein is the challenge, though. The actual value of music, in a sense, has stayed the same. What do I mean? How much did you pay for your iTunes subscription or Spotify subscription 5 years ago? It's the same value that you pay for now. Right? We know that in the US, iTunes has just increased the subscription. They're working on that in Europe. But there is a big push about what is the value of music. And as creators, we often don't think about that, because you are comfortable to pay, let's say, a VOD service. If they say 150 rands, for Netflix, Amazon, or whatever, it seems fair. But why are people not willing to pay that much for music? And there's a lot more music than, whatever titles you have on video. So those are the sort of questions that we are asking. And you will see a lot of writers and music executives are starting to ask those questions. Say, but hang on, why is music pegged at this price? And this price never moves, right? I think it's been, hopefully, close to 10 years where people are so comfortable paying that one price. So that number, it's obviously a host of things. I'll break them down. But obviously I'm speaking more on the digital side, that 3.1 billion for the world, in a sense, from royalties. This is not the overall value of music, but it's just from, mechanical and performing rights. But you will notice that if you just tweak that number, because you would probably find that, the users of music could potentially pay 3 times more, easily. And they would still be happy. I don't think anybody will be sad that they're paying 150 rands a month, but it's just an educational thing that people need to get to. So when we then sort of dice it up a little bit, you can see, obviously, COVID had an impact, which is okay. But I think the most important aspect is seeing how it's broken up. How much TV, this is obviously globally, influences the royalties that you would earn. And you will see even within the country, it's not too different. And digital, and then all other sort of means. So that's TV and radio. You will still see that TV and radio and digital form the biggest chunks. So if you want to be successful, and the reason why I want to look at it from a global perspective is that your music does not just play in South Africa. That's a wrong perception to have. So if you want to be successful, you can't have a mindset of saying, no, just tell me about SA. It's like, but where does your music play? Somebody in Germany could be listening to your song. So you need to have that idea to say, hey, I should actually be targeting, TV, radio, and digital, because there is more exposure there. And, that will mean that you stand a better chance of earning. So from a Samro perspective, when we look at foreign, money coming from other countries into our country, right, for our royalties, we currently receive about 30 million rands. In, let's say, about 3 years ago, it used to be about 18 million, 1.8. So you can already see that there's a very positive trend, right? And we estimate that in the next 3 to 4 years, that number could get as high as 50 million rands. That is because, obviously, we are exporting more in terms of, be it Mapiano or anything else, but a lot more people are listening to our music. But what I want to add is that, especially for digital, the big part is in South Africa, not a lot of people subscribe. So when I say subscribe, they don't pay, because you can be on Spotify and on the freemium service. So in Europe and in America, a lot of those services people do subscribe. So meaning, you could have a lot more spins here, but not make money. But if your spins are there, you will make a lot more money. And that's what we would like to see. And, the graph on that side, that's the scary one. Because this is, as much as we talk about 9 billion, but this now tells you where is it actually sitting. So you will see Europe obviously has got the biggest share, and, as predictable as it is, maybe the US and Canada, and then obviously Asia, but look at Africa on that side. And this is Africa, not South Africa, right? Africa as a whole. It's literally this much. I mean, this is in euros. There's, I think, 75 million euros. And then on all the other markets, we're talking billions. All right? So I think Latin America is still 300 million euros, but then thereafter, it's just billions. So therein is the differences. And I think with creatives, it's always this thing to say, but yeah, man, we're not making money, in this region. But the challenge is in that portion there, to say the market in itself, it is not as big as you think it is. If you want to compare yourself to a European artist, immediately you can see the problem. Where the pool, they've got a bigger pie, and obviously even if you get a small slice in that pie, it's still bigger than yours. Where that side, you need to get a big slice, for you to make money from royalties. And therein is the challenge. So obviously where we come in is to try and increase that slice as best as we can, because that's the focus. Then whatever slice you have, even if the usage is the same, but you'll earn more each year. That's the whole logic of it. And then just a quick glance, you can see the top markets, obviously the top 10. I think most of them will be quite predictable. But I always find one, and I just wanted to highlight it, Japan, right? Japan is a very small country. Like, it's crazy how small it is. But when you look at the amount of money they collect from royalty, just from licensing and paying out royalties, it's insane. I mean, that is essentially that is 819 million euros. I mean, for you to make it into rands, you'll have to multiply that by 20. I mean, that's an insane amount of money. We're talking about 15 billion or something like that in 1 year, by the way. So it's crazy. So it means, yes, obviously, there's a lot of other sort of, let's say, conditions that influence it. South Africa, lack of growth and those sort of things do have an impact. But I do think that, obviously, we still need to work harder in licensing, that is in Africa/Samro, to make sure that, we can strive to get as close as possible. We won't get there quite soon. But there is an objective for us to try and get to at least R1 billion, within the next few years. It's not going to be easy, but we understand. But in our greater scheme of things, you will see as I go that it will literally move us forward a lot. Then coming closer to home now, this is now Africa. You will notice that even from a CZEC perspective, the only markets that are sort of, I don't want to use the word, but I'll use it loosely, that are taken seriously. It's South Africa, Morocco, and Cote d'Ivoire, right? And the reason is all the other markets are so small that maybe it's 1 million there, it's 15 million there, it's almost nothing. And obviously, when you say 15 million and then you convert it to euros, it's nothing, guys. It's laughable. So you will see that, but, why do we have that problem? And then what is interesting, though, is that even when you look at those three, you look at the contributors, it's still the same things: TV, radio, and digital. So when you compare it with what is happening globally, the same players keep on coming up. Obviously, live will be a big one, but from a royalties perspective, it's not as massive. It's massive, obviously, for, yes, the performer when you are paid for the gig, but here we're just talking about royalties. So the big thing is that we are working on, with other African countries to try and sort of help them license. But I think besides licensing, the issue that they have is that there are some systematic challenges that they have sometimes from a governance perspective. And we are trying to help them because currently, as I speak to you, a lot of the money, like if your repertoire is used in Africa, the money does not come through this way. And that's the problem. If you go to Kenya, if you go to Dar es Salaam, you will find South African music playing in clubs everywhere. But the question is, does that money come through? No. So that is something that we're working hard at. And I mean, as close as just Botswana, right? Don't go too far. And now we are still fixing that because the money does not flow. And therein is the problem with Africa, because countries almost operate as silos. Nobody wants to work with anybody else, but we are trying to fix that. But this gives you a sense as to, in 2021, where we were in Euro sense. And obviously, I'll speak to where we are heading to in a moment. I know this is a bit small, but there's about 33 countries where there are CMOs. It just gives you a sense as to how many CMOs are in Africa. And obviously, these CMOs don't necessarily all, let's say, work well with each other. And that's the problem that we are also working on fixing. Okay, now coming a little bit closer to home, this is now Samro, right? This is slightly old data, but I'll then show you the current stuff as to how we are performing. So this just gives you a sense as to how Samro has been performing. I'll be honest, previous performance has not been, astonishing, because you will see that for licensing, we were doing around about 500 million. I think the previous 2 years, about 513 million. Nothing, obviously fantastic in terms of growth. We were always doing single-digit growth. And if you compare growth to inflation, you will see that we were not really growing. Because if your growth is less than the inflation value, then there's a problem there, right? So, but I think the biggest thing that we should look at, though, is this graph over here, because this tells you what we are charging for administering your rights. We would obviously want that graph to continue going down. And currently it was at a certain point 30 odd, but now it was sitting at, let's say, close to 26%. So you want to push that as low as possible. The ideal number is 20. If we can get to 20, that would be fantastic. And that's the objective. So you want to push that graph down while the revenue still goes up. That is the mix that you want at the end of the day. Okay? So at this moment, obviously, this is the sort of like the split that you have, let's say in SA, right? Revenue-wise. This is last year, in a sense, where Samro, Samro is about 63% of royalties, in terms of what you would receive. So Samro would come through 63%, and then Sempra is like 24%, and then Capasso, right? You will notice I didn't include Risa because it's very small. Like I think it's 20 million or something. So it's not, that wouldn't help us much. But you will notice that even if you look at this pie, it's not even R1 billion really of revenue. And you would think that if you take the entire pool, it should be way over that, but it's not. So, we need to all work to get this, to make this pie a lot more bigger. Because as a creative, it's not that easy just to say, no, man, you must get your music used out there a lot more. It's not easy. We get that. So the only way sometimes is more money needs to come in so that even if, your songs are still played the same amount of times on radio and digital, but at the end, you still get to earn more because of the fact that the money is increasing. Okay? So this is actually an interesting slide. Obviously, this is something that has not been shared out publicly as yet, but this is this financial year. By the way, the Samro financial year works from July to June. We are closing our financial year this month. You will notice I didn't include the fourth quarter there because obviously the numbers are not final. But if you compare what we have achieved in terms of this particular sort of financial year, I'll show you as we go, it's way, way, way better. And I know it may not look like it because when you look at the budget versus the actual, but the budget was stretched much higher this year versus the other years. What is interesting is this. If I show you, go back here, remember this, the previous year, remember we were on 514. And this was 4 quarters, meaning 12 months. Here, it's only 9 months. We're already on 461. So that already gives you a sense to say, oh, okay, so 9 months, you're already at 461. So we still have 3 months to add to this. So it's going to be substantially better. And that's what we are looking forward to, and that's what Martin obviously is referring to in terms of us working very hard to increase the revenue. This will give you a sense of what we expect, at the end of the day. So for this financial year, the previous financial year, which is FY 2022, we were when we say 494, this was purely what was licensing, not interest from anything else. That's the number. This year, we expect to be above 600 million, right? So it's an increase of about 100 million rands, just over that. And obviously, this would be the first time, I think, in 18 years that Samro has a double-digit increase. So that's for us something positive that obviously we will celebrate once we close off the numbers. We have a week to do that. So, yeah, I know, sounds crazy, but yeah, no, it's not a bet. So we already know at least certain deals are done. I mean, we're just finalizing this month. So the idea is to obviously close off, and what that impact has, obviously, for each and every person, somebody might be saying, but how does that 100 million extra affect me? What it means is that for the same usage, obviously, you get paid more. That's what it means, right? So it doesn't always mean that, yes, your royalties will increase by 18% because the revenue increased by 18%, because more money will come from different places. But definitely where we get the most revenue, or where we were able to maximize, is definitely digital. And we did a lot of business with what we call general. So general is like your hospitals, your let's say your like your normal retailers. We did a lot more business there. And I know you might be thinking, why hospitals and hotels and stuff like that? I mean, crazy things. I mean, we've been licensing, like, think about it. How many TVs do you think a hotel has? Like a hotel chain? Thousands, right? Those things have to pay a license. Before, we were not really working on it that much. So, they have to pay a license because it's a public use. And I know a lot of people, I said this to somebody and they judged me for it. But we've been also licensing even hospitals, right? I mean, there's a lot of private hospitals that have got TVs in those rooms. They have to pay for them. So the whole idea here is that, we are maximizing every avenue to try and improve on that particular number. And we hope that obviously it will show in your hands because that's the only time when it matters, right? And you can see the value of it. Okay? So at the end of the day, I know this one is all about Samro revenue, but before I close, I just want to also touch on something else that we do with this money, because it's something that we often forget. This is last year's numbers, though. This is the Samro retirement annuity, all right? Every time we also increase revenue, what happens is that Samro has got another entity that it set up in 1963 or something. And the whole idea of it is to say, you need to, contribute on behalf of Samro members. So previously, you will see that the contributions were in the region of about 6-7 million rands. And then last year, we were able to increase it to about 11 million. And then obviously this year, we are looking at increasing it much more. So every single Samro member that is part of that, Samro Retirement Annuity Fund, it means you get even more contributions, right? Because the whole idea is this, that someday you will retire. I know you may not feel like it now, but you will retire, I can assure you. So when you do, we would like to be able to pay you a certain amount, and so that during retirement, life is not as tough. And that's the whole idea of it. So obviously we've been doing it for years now, but the whole idea is to make sure that we constantly increase it so that as creatives, you are not, because a lot of creatives don't save. And, at the end of the days, or there are sort of like, great days, then these guys are not able to even buy just food to feed themselves. And that's not, a good position to be in. Okay, and then in closing, I just want to recap and say that, for us, from a revenue growth perspective, obviously, digital has been a big one for us. We've been working on it. And remember, with digital, it's all about not just licensing, like Disney, for example. It's not just about licensing Disney, but it's about negotiating a good rate with Disney, right? Anybody can license, but the issue is, can you negotiate a good rate, right? Whether you are Netflix, whether you are Amazon, those sort of players. Then obviously new business, Martin spoke about municipalities. There's about 274 municipalities in South Africa. Western Cape has 30. So, and not all 30 are licensed, right? So for us, obviously we've been engaging with them so that we can get all of them licensed. At this point, it's going well. I mean, there is progress, but we want to get to a point where all of them are licensed. And obviously some things, can't share now, but there are things that, we are planning to do with them in relation to obviously them supporting this entire venture. And, you'll see it once, we get to that point. But the big part is also doing what we call comprehensive licensing. So it's more about creating more your key account type licenses and making sure that, any business that plays music obviously is licensed. So that has been, a big focus for us. And with that said, I would like to just open for questions so that I don't speak by myself.